IVM.
Welcome everyone to episode 60 of the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast. For those of you joining us for the very first time, Edges and Sledges is a weekly cricket podcast focused on Indian cricket and the IPL. The podcast is run by three cricket fans. It's Varun, based in Singapore, Ashwin's based in the US, and my name is DJ, and I'm based in London. We've done 59 episodes to date, and after that IPL, we decided that we must take a week off to catch our breath. And what a final we had. That slow ball from Malinga just shattered millions of CSK hearts all over the world. In that break, we've been busy prepping for the upcoming World Cup, and we wanted to share some really great news with you. Edges and Sledges has joined IVM, India's largest podcast network, and we are super excited about that. IVM have got a great bunch of shows, and we are absolutely delighted to have been picked to join them. But don't worry, as an existing subscriber, nothing changes for you. We're still available on all the big podcast platforms, including IVM, so you can just carry on listening to us as you have. Now, as part of the World Cup, we're going to be running a series of podcasts where we speak to special guests from all over the world. But first, we thought we'd speak to someone who's actually played in 2 World Cups and is also the youngest ever to captain a test nation, a guy called Tatenda Taibu. Tatendas actually just released his autobiography, Keeper of the Faith. It's a fascinating story of courage, faith, incredible talent, all in the face of adversity and threats. Tatenda is the first black captain of Zimbabwe in any sport. He's also the youngest test captain in the history of the game. He even did an IPL stint. I mean, is there anything that the guy can't do? We'll put a link to his autobiography in the show notes. But the next thing you hear is going to be our interview with Tatenda. Do enjoy. We have with us today a very special guest, Tatenda Taibu. Tatenda, thank you so much for joining us on the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast. We're super excited to have you on. IPL 12 was just concluded, and I wanted to ask you very quickly about whether you watched that final and what your thoughts were about that.
Yes, I did watch. I did watch the IPL. Not all the games, but some of the games, and I did watch parts of the final one. And there is a lot of excitement about finals that go to the wire, and that was really a dream final. For the 12th edition of the IPL, which was really exciting. Going to the last ball.
And Tatenda, you've been an IPL, a part of the IPL yourself. What was it like to be part of the IPL back in 2008 when it had just started? You were part of the Kolkata Knight Riders, and to us as fans and spectators, it almost seemed unreal to see you playing alongside Brendan McCullum, Sourav Ganguly. It was probably the best thing that has happened to cricket from our perspective. What was it like for you actually playing it?
Well, obviously there was a lot of hype about IPL, and you know how cricket is regarded in India. It was an amazing feeling and, almost unreal, to be honest. And, the coverage around the sport was amazing. And, there was a lot of questions about, T20, if it was going to go on well or not and things like that. So there was a lot that was going on. And I mean, fair play to the people that started it. And I reckon cricket in India has grown magnificently because of that. Going back to my own personal play, I really honestly didn't think that I would even get a game, because looking at the 12 overseas pros that we had, Chris Gale, Brendan McCullum, Dave Hussey, Shoaib Akhtar, Umagul, to Ajanta Mendes, Tusha Pereira, to mention just but a few. For me to be able to get 3 games, was amazing for me as a cricketer. But I really, really enjoyed my time, my stint there, and I was lucky to have a 3-year contract, though I didn't get to play a game in the second year or the third year.
I think it's fantastic to hear from someone who's actually played the IPL. But Tatenda, the World Cup, the 12th edition of the IPL must have finished, but the 12th edition of the World Cup is actually coming up, and you've played one of those as well. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience of playing the 2003 World Cup? Obviously, it's one of the World Cups very close to our hearts as Indian fans, because India made it to the finals against Australia. Unfortunately, we lost. But it's a World Cup that kind of captured the imagination of a billion people. And there was quite a lot that went on for Zimbabwe, particularly as one of the co-hosts. So can you tell us a little bit how it was playing that World Cup?
That World Cup had plenty as well that was going on around. I mean, we, as you've mentioned, that we were co-hosts for that World Cup. There was the issue about England coming over to play or not, and they ended up not participating in the game that we were to play against them in Harare. And that worked to our advantage somewhat because we then, recorded a win against England. And that meant we only had to win, I think, two more games to be able to qualify for the second round, which we did. And with the last game against Pakistan being a draw. And I personally was playing good cricket at the time. I'd just been promoted to number 6 and number 5 at times, and scoring a few runs along the way. So I really enjoyed, 2003 World Cup, but I think I enjoyed 2011 World Cup, more because I loved playing, on Indian soil, and with the way I have a big fan base in India. It was like playing at my second home.
Absolutely fantastic. So there was also the one particular incident I wanted to speak to you a little bit about on the death of democracy protest. And I know you've covered it extensively in your book, Keeper of Faith. Can you tell us a little bit and tell our listeners a little bit about the death of democracy protest and what your thoughts were at the time when Andy Flower and Henry Longa wore those black armbands?
Look, at the time I was only very young, 20, just, turning 20. And so I didn't understand a lot that was going on with the stand itself. I did understand a bit that was going on within the country. However, Andy and Henry decided to keep a lot of this away from the players up until the very last minute. So how I got to find out was I was having an interview with Andy Flower, and normally the journalists used to ask Andy a question and then come over to ask me, and then they would have questions like that. And then what then happened was he was then asked if England should come over and play, and he said he didn't think England should come over and play because it will be supporting what's happening in Zimbabwe. Now, I didn't think so because I was thinking, okay, I'm a cricketer, and if countries are not coming to play in Zimbabwe, that means I don't have a profession. And I was very surprised to hear Andy say that, knowing that he was also, he was also a cricketer and was earning money by playing. After the interview, I started walking back and I said, Andy, what was that all about? And he said, Tatenda, you are playing well. You are improving at a rapid pace. You continue working hard like you've been doing. And there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be, happening around. Don't pay any attention to it. Just continue with your game and you're going to be a leader very soon. Now, I really had respect and still have a lot of respect for Andrew Flower. And because he'd said that, I just took what he had said, and that was good enough for me. So that's all I understood about it at the time. Obviously, growing up a little bit more and understanding a bit more now, I understand a little bit more now than I did then.
Wow. It's fascinating, and it's very obvious that you've been through a lot of interesting experiences, and we'll talk a little bit more about those at the end. But I do want to talk a little bit about the World Cup that's coming up. And, you've talked a lot about in the media about your son, Tatenda Jr., and wanting him to see cricket and wanting him to see you play cricket and things like that. Really honestly, how does it feel that we're now down to a 10-team World Cup, and for the first time since I think 1983, Zimbabwe is not going to be playing in it? How does that feel for a former captain of the side?
It is heartbreaking for me because I'm still Zimbabwean. I would have loved to see Zimbabwe, participating in one of the biggest stages in sport. However, that's not going to happen. But to answer your question, it is painful. I'm not really a big fan of of 10 teams for a World Cup. I mean, it doesn't really give the definition of a World Cup clearly to me, because we if we're looking at other organizations, if you're looking at football, we're looking at other sports, they have way more than 10 teams. If we're looking at football, if I'm not mistaken, they have, I think, 34 teams, if I'm not mistaken. That gives a bit more indication of a World Cup. I think what should be happening is trying to get all those teams that have participated in World Cups to continue on helping them with their development, helping them, with their player search and then player development, so that they continue to develop, so that we don't lose countries along the way. We were talking about the 2003 World Cup. And in the 2003 World Cup, one of the countries that made it all the way to the semifinals was Kenya. And where is Kenya now? Whereas I think that country should be helped along the way. I mean, if I'm to pick another country, we talk about Canada represented the World Cup in 2011. And where is Canada now? So if more emphasis was put on those teams, then if they're to play more games against the better teams, yes, at the very beginning, the games will be one-sided, but the more they get used to the pace and speed of international cricket played by the better teams, the more they'll be able to get speed. A very good example of that is Bangladesh. We played a huge part as Zimbabwe to bring Bangladesh to where they are, because we continue to play against them. That's why there's a great relationship between Bangladesh and Zimbabwe. Now, if Bangladesh had not been playing someone that was playing better cricket than them, they would not have had experience and exposure to then improve. So that's what I think should happen. If that happens, then more teams will then be available to participate and be competitive at World Cups.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, as fans of the game, many of us were pretty disappointed at the 10-team World Cup as well. So hopefully maybe somebody at the ICC is listening to you and will take notice. But I do want to ask, before we move on to this year, in the qualifiers. So Afghanistan and Ireland had to qualify as well, and they were the teams that made it through. But Zimbabwe fell a little short. What do you think it is that went wrong this year?
Well, Zimbabwe is struggling with proper structures, with proper sporting governance. I mean, a good indication is just, if I'm to look at my role during that time, I was a selector, and I was a selector. I was the only selector who was supposed to be selecting the national team, the A side, the development side, the women's team, and the under 19 team. And how it can be possible how can it be possible for only one person to select several teams? Because I've got to watch cricket for me to be able to select, isn't it? And in as much as I in as much as I made the board aware that it was not possible to be the only selector, nothing was done. So that's I'm just giving that as an example of the structures that are not in place, in my country in cricket moment. So that's just one area. There are several other areas. So we've been struggling for years, to be professional as an organization. One of the main things, if I'm to say, is we don't have enough personnel, enough cricketing personnel that are qualified to do a certain job, either in administration or right on the ground, as in coaches and people that actually work with the players. Because you look at the team, the Zimbabwe team, that people always talk about, 1999, all the way to around 2004, when the mess really started for Zimbabwe cricket. If we look at the team around those 5 years, probably 80% of those players have left the country. So we keep losing players. We keep losing administrators and potential administrators. And then if you look at the players that do well at age groups, when they then go to universities outside the country, most of them decide not to come back. So the ones that then come back to be in Zimbabwe are probably our second string, players. So that all then points out to structures that are not in place. So that's part of the problems that have been occurring for a long time, and us failing to qualify is just showing the damage that has happened over the years.
Fair enough, Tatenda. Thanks for that. And you mentioned a lot about players. So I'm going to ask you two questions now on the current World Cup. The first is, who are your favorite players out of the current lot playing this World Cup? And the second is, who do you think are going to be the 4 teams that make it to the semifinals in this World Cup?
Well, if I'm picking the final 4, I'm going to pick England as one of them. The reason I'm picking England is, one, they've got home advantage, so they've played on these pitches and they've played under the conditions that the World Cup is going to be played, and the time that the World Cup is being played. I mean, that's the season over here. So, and they've been playing good one-day cricket for the past year or year and a half. So that's why I'll pick England. I will pick New Zealand as the other one. And the reason why I'm picking New Zealand, they probably have got the best balanced one-day side at the moment. And the conditions that they are going to face at the moment in this World Cup are similar to the conditions that they have back in New Zealand. And it seems as if, in some of the grounds or most of the grounds here in the UK, the grounds are very small, which are similar to the ones in New Zealand. So that New Zealand is my second pick. My third pick is India. India has been playing good cricket. I think ever since the introduction of T20, of IPL, you have many players that will go to India to play. So when they are playing, all say if there are 12 international players that are joining KKR, I'm talking about 2008 and giving it as an example, then all the local Indian players are going to get experience from these 12 players that are coming from all the different places. Now, the Indian top players do not go to all the other tournaments to play, so their local players do not get the same experience. So because of that, India will have more experience and will have more knowledge and intimate knowledge of players from different countries, because all the top players play in IPL. Now, this is besides them, playing good cricket for the past 2 years or so. So that's why I would choose India. And then the fourth one that I would choose is Pakistan. Pakistan is a country that you really don't know what they will give you. However, when they turn their game on, they can easily beat any team, in a whether be it a World Cup or in any match. But another reason that I chose Pakistan is their ability to strike, with their bowlers. Because I think with high scoring games that we've been seeing, teams with a good bowling attack will probably, be the ones that will, go the final mile. So those are my 4 that I predict will be in the semis.
Fantastic, Tatenda. So if we want to put you on the spot, who do you think is going to win this World Cup 2019? So we can have you on the record with that.
Oh dear. It is very difficult for me to, honestly speaking, it is very difficult for me to choose the last one.
I'll give you a hint. Most of our listeners are based in India.
You're putting me on the spot. I had a BBC interview about 2 weeks ago, and I was put on a spot, just like you've done. And yes,
I actually heard the BBC Stumped
yes,
podcast, which is
yes.
why.
So you've done the same. I think I'll be biased because I'm always telling people that my second home is India. Simply because of the way I have a big fan base in India. I mean, even now when I go to India, I still struggle to move around because once I'm spotted, there's a big mob. And I last played international cricket 7 years or even 8 years ago. I don't remember. 7 years ago. So, but I'm still recognized easily in India, and I can't even move around like I do, in Zimbabwe or in UK. So because of that, I think I'm more biased. It's not cricketing reason. It's just, I've just, picked my second home, because Zimbabwe is not taking part.
Fantastic. So we'll go with India on that case. Now, moving on to your book, Tatenda, you've written Keeper of Faith, Cricket, Conflict and God in Zimbabwe's Age of Extremes. And I've been reading it, and I actually think it's one of the best cricketing autobiographies I've read. I've literally just finished Sanjay Manjrekar's Imperfect, and that I thought was very good. Yours is brutally honest, but in a different way. Manjrekar talks more about his personal troubles and his personal kind of issues and kind of lack of belief and growing as a commentator, etc. Whereas yours is a fantastic mix, I thought, of the politics of the time as well as cricket and growing up playing cricket and all of that. So tell us a little bit about an interesting incident that you've covered in the book. That it's littered with lots and lots of interesting things. So just give our listeners a bit of a taste of what the book contains.
Well, just to give you a little bit of a background on, why I started to embark on this journey to write about my life story. I was having a chat with my wife, and we were just talking about certain incidences that happened during my career. And when I started talking about it, she got quite emotional and started crying. And then she said, "But how come, Tatenda, you haven't told me this part?" And I said, "Look, my character is such that when something has happened, I just let it go and I focus more on a solution than to keep my eyes on the problem." And then she said, "Surely you've got to get the world to know a lot about your life because you've kept a lot away from people." And she said, "Well, I can help you, to start this journey. You like to just go on and just, live happily and, be just this simple person. But if you never speak these things out, they will never come out. And don't you think your fans would want to know such?" So that's how that's how I got to writing. And when I wrote, I just thought, let me pour my heart out and just tell it as it is. And I'm glad that it came out that way. So to give one, incident, one time when after I had become, the youngest captain in the history of the game, I thought I was just a cricketer and I wanted to do well for my country and I wanted to be world number one at some stage. I had all these big dreams. What I didn't know was that you could never separate sport and politics. Because if I'm looking at it in Zimbabwe only, Zimbabwe cricket comes under what's called the Sports and Recreation Commission. The Sports and Recreation Commission comes under the Ministry of Sport. So because it's like that, then politics is already involved. So I was just a naive boy to just think, okay, sport is sport, politics is politics, but there is a mix somewhere. It never goes, in parallel lines. Now, I started to stand up for certain things that I felt were not being done correctly, especially for my players as a captain. And when I did, I didn't know that this was going to get me to end up being in meetings with the vice president, with the vice minister of information and communication. I didn't know that I would then meet the governor of Zimbabwe, Dr. Gideon Gono. I didn't know that all this would get me to end up meeting the president, because I was just naive to and thought that I was just a cricketer. And in one of these meetings, with Brighton Matonga, he was trying to explain to me, or to stop me from retiring, because I had mentioned that I was going to retire. And he was trying to stop me from retiring, but also stop me from, saying the things that I was saying. Now, I did not listen to him because I knew what I was talking about, and I was adamant that the players have got to be looked after if we are going to continue with a good team in the future. And that ended up with me having a look at pictures of dead people from an envelope which was thrown on the table for me to look. Now, when that happened, I thought, wow, I've seen this in movies, but this actually do happens in real life. And it was a really scary, part of my life, because not only did I get, that, whether it was to threaten me that I could be one of the dead, one like these people that I was seeing on those pictures of dead people, but we had to leave the house, to live in a hotel. And TJ, my first boy, was only 10 days old. And that event was followed by another and by another and by another, up until my wife, Loveness, almost got kidnapped. And then that was pretty much the final straw, when we decided, you know what, I would love to play for my country. I would love to, to continue and fight for what's right. But when it's getting to this, I think it's better to have my family safe than to be sorry later.
Yeah, wow. I mean, it couldn't have been easy, you being just a young man. I think were you about 20 years old when all of that happened, right?
Yes, I was about 20, I think just about 21, I think.
Absolutely incredible for a 20-year-old to have to go through all of that. But yes, so that sounds pretty scary. And I mean, I know you've written about it in your book, so thank you for reliving that, and it couldn't have been easy for you. On a slightly lighter note, Tatenda, you know the name of our podcast is the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast, and it's almost like it's tailor-made for someone like you, because as a keeper, you grabbed all the edges, and as a player, you weren't shy of a little chat. So tell us a little bit about your sledging experience. Were you someone who enjoyed sledges? I know you once chirped at Shoaib Akhtar. Now, it takes a brave man to do that, I can say. Well, not having played him, but yeah. Tell us a little bit about, tell us a sledging story that maybe isn't in your book.
It takes a lot to get someone like me to be scared of anything. So it was quite scary to face Shoaib when he was running, when I was running in and bowling full pace. But I was and still am very competitive once I hit the field. So we're playing Pakistan, and we decided as a team that the best chances for us to win against the team that we're playing against, the makeup of the team that we're playing against, was to try and bowl them out. Now, our chances of bowling them out was to leave, grass on the pitch. But that was going to be a little bit dangerous, for us batsmen, because there was Shoaib on the one end, there was Waka Yunis, there was Muhammad Sami and Rana Navid with Saklen as the spinner. So we left grass on the pitch. Well, I think when I walked in, I batted number 6. And I walked in, we didn't have much on the board. And Shoaib was running in, and a few were passing through my nose, and Andy and I were in a bit of a partnership, and we were getting peppered, getting hit everywhere, and we both were fighting really hard. And Shoaib Akhtar came round the wicket. Then he started bowling body line to me, and I left some, got hit a few times, and he started chirping.
It was him that started it. It wasn't you.
No, it wasn't me. I never started the chirp. I never started the chirp. I never chirped a lot. in my career, but I would never start a chip because I always, even up to now, I always feel it's a waste of time, to be honest. Maybe because it does nothing to me. Someone is actually better off just going on about their cricket when I'm betting than to even chip. It's like it doesn't even get into my ears. So because it's like that to me, I just used to think it's just a waste of time. So then she started chirping. And then I was, by this time, Andy had gone out and, we had lost a few wickets. Blignot had come in and Blignot was like, saying, Shoaib is bowling quickly and he's chirping. And I said, yeah, he's chirped me a bit, but I'm going to chirp him back. He says, no. But he was saying in Shona because Blignot used to speak Shona. So he was saying in Shona, please, Tatenda, don't, because, he will kill us. But I just thought, you know what? I would chirp back. So he started chirping and I started chirping back.
So can you tell us what he said to you, or is it not? Can't you not repeat it? Maybe you can translate it in family-friendly language, and maybe your response as well. But it was in English. It wasn't in Urdu. He wasn't chirping you in Urdu, was he?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't in Urdu. It wasn't in Urdu because it's pointless to chirp in Urdu, isn't it? Because I won't understand what he's saying. I get along quite well with Shuaib. But the funnier story is not actually that chirp. It was later on when I met him in during the 2011 World Cup, because remember we played Pakistan in Sri Lanka. And he says, Tiba, you remember that time when we chirped each other? I said, yeah, I remember that. I'll never forget that. And he says, you know what? I had a really good idea. I said, yeah, tell me. And he said, remember when there was a bit of a delay and Muhammad Yusuf, Inzamam, and myself were together? I said, yeah, I remember that. He said, I had a plan to them. And because you were not backing down whatsoever. So I thought, maybe let me scare you with a beamer. I won't direct it to you, but let me scare you with a beamer. And then maybe you may put your guard down. And then he says, Inzamam, refused. He said, no. Try body line or something. But he says, but you know what? Ever since that time, I've had respect for you because you don't back down. So it was quite nice, when you're hearing that from someone who was feared around the world for his, just.
I think it just shows the strength of your character, because I think Shoaib went on and broke the 100-mile-per-hour barrier a few months after that. So it wasn't like he was bowling slowly when you were having your little sledging battle. But so we've already spoken about the future of Zimbabwe cricket, and you've written quite a lot about it in your book as well. But what does the future hold for you, Tatenda? Where do you see yourself going? Do you see yourself being involved with Zimbabwe cricket in the future as well?
I've always said to myself, because we are only but human, we cannot predict the future. And I'm not a person who holds grudges. I was actually speaking to someone last night, and I said to him, he's a friend of mine. He's been done badly by Zimbabwe cricket, by the organization. And I said to him, you know what? Just don't hold a grudge against anyone. Just leave peaceably. I said, I've left Zimbabwe cricket, not in great terms, but I never wish them bad. I wish the players well. I wish the administration well. And I've always maintained that, because at the end of the day, this is how I think about it. At the end of the day, if Zimbabwe cricket is to collapse, which it has been nosediving for years, if it collapses, the damage it would have done to a boy that is like I was one time many years ago, just a boy who wanted to represent his country in a sport that he's passionate about. Those dreams will be cut short for that kid. And no one will know about this kid now because he's somewhere, in the high density suburbs of Zimbabwe, not known. So I would like to see Zimbabwe cricket continue only for that young boy who wants to represent his country. Only for that boy that's probably hitting balls with, at the Bear Garden with his dad today, right now as we are having this, this conversation. I want Zimbabwe cricket to continue for those kids that who, that would want to represent their country in the future. So to maybe continue to answer your question, the future can be bright should there be proper structures in place, and should there be proper cricketing decisions that are made, and not people that are going in to want to be part of Zimbabwe cricket, to be part of the Zimbabwe cricket organization, simply because they want a few dollars in their pocket.
Absolutely fantastic, Tatenda. And I think one of the things that comes through in your book is the amount of work you put in to get to where you ended up. Because, I mean, all your coaches and all the running arounds, because it's something that's very common when we were growing up as well, because I think we're from the same generation where it was okay to give a child the rod if they didn't do properly. And I think the amount of hard work you put in to get to where you got, it shines through brilliantly in the book. The interesting incidents about how you met your wife as well, and how you climbed over the fence to get back in after you were out late into your boarding school and things. I think the book you've written is a book that, as you say, has come from the heart. It's something everyone from our generation will actually identify with. I've really enjoyed reading it, I have to say. Keeper of Faith I think it's already one of my favorite autobiographies. And I'm not saying this because we're speaking to you. I have read a lot of autobiographies, and not all of them are as honest or as interesting as yours. A lot of them are very bland and don't tell the truths that need to be told. Whereas I think your book does the job really, really well, and it tells it like it is. And I think that is absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much for joining us on the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. We wish you well. We wish Zimbabwean cricket well, and hope to see you back on the podcast soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
So that's the interview, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it, because we really enjoyed talking to Tatenda. He was our first ever international cricketer, actually, but hopefully there's going to be many more to come. Remember, there's a link to his autobiography in the show notes if you want to buy it. Now, before we wrap up for this week, I just wanted to quickly mention the official World Cup 2019 books. Now, one of my greatest memories from 1999, the World Cup held in England last, is the India Today guide to the World Cup. Our Instagram actually has a picture of the book that I found lying in a dusty drawer somewhere, so go and check that out. But we were recently provided a review copy of the Cricket World Cup 2019 official guides, and so I, for one, was super excited. Now, this guide has got info on all the players, the grounds, stats, history of the World Cup and how it came about, the qualification competition for the 2019 version, famous games, record-breaking moments, and the photos are absolutely outstanding. They really do bring the memories flooding back. So also there's a kids version for younger fans, and that's got games, puzzles, quizzes and things like that. So do get involved, go and pick them up. We're going to put a link in the show notes to that as well. So go and check those out. So that's the show this week, guys. Do get in touch with us on Twitter. We're at One Tip One Hand. We're on Facebook at One Tip One Hand. We're on Instagram at One Tip One Hand. Leave us a comment. Leave us a review on iTunes, Castbox, etc. We'll be back next week to preview India's game versus South Africa and Australia. So stay tuned. The World Cup's starting and we cannot wait.
Sachin Tendulkar, Virat Kohli, Don Bradman, and now Cyrus Brocha. Okay, probably not in the right company. I mean, Don Bradman is Australian. But it's called Cyrus Says, a wonderful show about everything. Find the show on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Do you wish you were smarter? Well, so do we. But the next best thing?
We could make you sound smarter.
And to help you with this endeavor, we are Simplified, a podcast that attempts to break down the complex world around you with a little knowledge, a lot of poor jokes, and a ton of random trivia.
Episodes out every Monday.
On the IVM Podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts.
See ya!